well, I thought, this is a really bad idea. I think we should go home. Then when the pandemic happened, everything changed. I had no income. And so I was alone. And I thought, instead of feeling sorry for myself, let me be of service to other people. I just wanted people to feel seen and feel that they mattered. My ultimate goal is to get people to see how similar we are. The biggest conflicts I've ever had in my life. But people don't listen to you when you're angry. We live in the richest country in the world, the most powerful country in the world, and there are still so many people experiencing homelessness.
What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Small Lake City Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Nielsen, and this week's guest is Jeanette Padilla. Now, Jeanette founded a nonprofit called the Food Justice Coalition. So the mission of the Food Justice Coalition is to provide nutrient-dense, healthy meals to people who need them. Now, the Food Justice Coalition started as she wanted to give back to the community on Christmas to help people who didn't have a meal that night. Now, it's ballooned into something so much more with great projects and including a lot of people from other previous episodes of the Small Lake City Podcast. We talk about a lot of things of her migrating here from living in Mexico to being stuck in a pandemic and finding herself in Utah and so much more. But a great person, really lifting where she stands and creating a great community of some of the best people in Salt Lake. But yeah, check it out. Definitely one you're going to enjoy.
I've talked to so many people, a lot of people that have podcasts, and it's interesting to see how different of a reason someone can have. Like there's people who, I want to grow the podcast itself. I want to have success as the podcast is the main focus. Then there's people, it's like, oh, come on the podcast so they can have access to, experts in their various arenas. And it's just so interesting to hear so many people. Or even when I had Stuart Anderson, who started a big bike club called Miduli, I don't care how much it grows. It's just a way for people to meet some of the other people in there and like, do we want to join or not? Mm. But it is I always like being on podcasts too. Like it's fun to be on the other side. Be like, I don't have to worry about anything. I don't have to edit any of this. It's all up to you. Right. And just throw my hands up in the air.
Right. And I just like talking to people too. And so I enjoy it from that perspective. I just like talking to people.
Same.
Oh, that's really what it is. I'm just curious about people. I just want to know everything about them, which the downside is that if I'm the guest, all the questions are asked of me. And so I feel like I'm just talking about myself, but I'm sitting here wondering about you and all the same questions and then some.
Hey, I will answer questions that get fired. It's conversational.
I'm just going to turn it around on you today, Eric, and you're going to be the guest. Surprise.
Plot twist.
Plot twist.
There was one time where I think it was a Frankie and Jess. They kind of turned it back on me and were like, so tell us about why you had a bad relationship with your dad growing up. And I was like, fair. All right. Right on. Anyway. Dad. But I'm excited to have you on here because for most context, sat down to record with Mayor Erin Mendenhall. And so at the end of every episode, I always ask people, if you could have someone on the podcast, who would you want to hear from to hear their story? And more often than not, it's kind of a thing, people think a lot, they want to give a good answer, and I end up cutting out a lot of white noise. But it was funny with Erin, as soon as I said, she's like, Jeanette Padilla. I'm like, okay. Noted.
Yeah.
But then it was even more awesome is a validation to you and your cause and everything that you're trying to do. So every Thursday I put out a newsletter of just what events are coming up in the next 2 weeks. There's a link in the comments if you want to subscribe. Check it out. You're going to know what's going on, all the activities, all the holidays. Good thing to do. Back to the story. So I sent that yesterday, and then at around, I think I sent it just after 3, and 30 minutes later, I got a text from a friend being like, hey, I just made a contribution to your guest platform. I was like, what? What do you mean guest platform? He's like, oh, I saw the newsletter, and food scarcity and quality of nutrition is really important to me and my wife. And we wanted to support that. I was like, I haven't even released this yet. I haven't even talked to her in person yet. I'm like, sure. Yeah. So it was fun. Again, there's my favorite people, Randy and Iggy. They were on the podcast. He's a light designer for some of the biggest shows around the world. She is a choreographer for dance and ice skating and was on So I Think You Can Dance, Once Upon a Time. Great people. Always somewhere. They're in Nashville right now. They're always somewhere. But so I'm excited to hear more about it because I love, so many of those organizations and people that I've had on the podcast are really trying to help a lot of our problems. And it's frustrating a lot of the time when people like the naysayers or people that hear the outcomes, they want to point their finger at one person. And, on the topic of Erin Mendenhall, it's an easy person to point the finger at, when in reality, it's so much more complicated than that. And to point at one person and have all the responsibilities, a little myopic. So
Yes.
I'm excited. I'm excited to hear more about it. But I know that you are not originally born from Salt Lake, migrated here from Puerto Rico?
Mexico.
Dang it.
Close.
It was a 50-50 and I went the wrong way.
No, you're good.
That's right, Jalisco.
Yeah, Jalisco. I want to speak to Erin first.
Oh, please,
she's such a delight, and it's so funny because before we knew each other, more closely, we didn't have a good relation. We didn't have any relationship because we didn't know each other. But I was very critical of her, mostly because I didn't know her. Then I got to know her, and like most people who get to know her, I realized she is so caring and so transparent and so brilliant. And I feel very lucky to call her a friend.
Yeah. And,
we don't agree on everything. I don't think it's healthy that anybody should ever agree 100% with everything their friends or their someone close to them says. But no, I have a lot of respect for her. And so it just, I just feel so warmed by the fact that she immediately just said, you should speak to Jeanette. I texted her earlier today. I listened to the episode this morning, and then I texted her this afternoon and said, thank you. That means a lot.
Like, I feel very similarly because, Erin's a good example of someone who, I didn't have like a strong perception of her. I knew who she was, when she came in the office and all of the things that were thrown at her immediately. And it's easy to be like, oh, yeah, what'd you do? Mm-hmm. But she was one of probably like 4 or 5 people that I go in with a hypothesis of who they are, what I think they're about. And I leave being like, you were wrong. This person is amazing. And it's fun to be able to have that experience. Because like not a lot of people can sit down and build a friendship with, or sit down and be like, hey, we're going to have an hour and a half conversation. And I'm just going to ask you whatever I want to based on my own curiosity. But it's fun also when there's another guest that I had who similarly, I saw them. I was like, listen, I don't think you're doing this for the right reason. I don't think, I just like didn't have any personal experience. So when I finally sat down to record with them, I was like, you were wrong. Like, again, like take your medicine, but that's how it all kind of ended up being. And I had that feeling, but then I ran into a friend at the farmer's market a few weeks after I recorded. He's like, oh, I listened to the episode with this person. And he's like, it changed my entire opinion of them because I used to think they were this. But then after hearing them talk about it, I think that there's so much more sincere, authentic in who they actually are. I was like, good. That's what we wanted to have.
Lo and behold, right? You prejudge somebody and then you have a conversation and you change your mind. It's who would have thought? I think this is why just reaching out and being in conversation with each other, whether it's on a podcast or not, it can do wonders. I think Erin mentioned this on her podcast, on her episode, and it's something that we've said to each other multiple times, that humans are so much more alike than they are dissimilar, and we have so much more in common than that which separates us. And we have to remember that. And it's really hard when you have so many forces, as evident right now by international government, that are trying to pit us against each other, to the detriment of us all, right? With the exception of the 1%. And so, it would really, do wonders for us individually and as a collective to remember that we are so much more alike than we are different. And so that's the story we try to tell at Food Justice through the avenue of food. So I'm excited to talk to you about it.
No, I'm excited too, because I've been involved, well, not been involved directly, but I've kept tabs on a lot of the homeless population and kind of different initiatives that go into it, because worked for a time at Cicero Group downtown, which does a lot of work for the homeless population. Talked with Erin, talked with Preston Cochran, so it's been fun to kind of get these like different angles of homelessness. How do we combat it? What really is the issue to be solved? Because it becomes so much more dynamic than just like, one of the most frustrating things I hear about it from people is like, well, can't we just get rid of them? Like, can you elaborate on that? Like, murder them? Just like take them out? Like, go drop them in the desert? Like, what does this mean?
Right.
And it's hard because a lot of people can't truly grasp it until it happens to them personally, which I would never want anyone to have a friend, loved one, or family member, whatever that might be, to go through a period of homelessness or food scarcity or any sort of like strong discomfort. But it's hard when the only way that people can truly grasp that is if it does happen to them or if they can see it firsthand. But before we kind of dive into the story, the details, everything, I mean, give a little summary of food justice and what you do.
Yeah, so Food Justice Coalition exists as this resource, this immediate resource to connect people who are experiencing food insecurity, to connect them directly with nutrient-dense prepared meals, so they can have not only a nutritious meal but something that is readily, available. And we do these prepared meals instead of just giving groceries to save people time, because oftentimes the people that are experiencing food insecurity are also experiencing time poverty. Sometimes there is a lack of skill as well that's there. And so we want to, of cooking skill, I should say. So we want to, save them time and give them something really nutrient dense so they can nourish themselves as they try to figure out their next step, right, in securing or increasing their food security. All of our food is plant-based, which most people can't really ever tell unless we tell them it's plant-based. It's just good food that happens to be plant-based. And we do that for environmental reasons, sustainability reasons, and for health reasons.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm a person who, like, if you take me to a vegan spot, I'm not going to be like, no, thank you.
Right.
Like, even when I lived in Seattle, my favorite ice cream place there was a vegan ice cream place. And I'd have to, like, twist people's arms. Like, we're going to go get ice cream. They're like, whoa, plant-based. I'm like, listen, hear me out here.
Right.
But then the same way, like, a good example of this is, like a restaurant that people go to and they go to for a dish. Mm-hmm. And like a good example of this is HSL, where if I mention people like, oh, HSL, they're like, oh, the General Tso's cauliflower. And I'm like, vegan dish. I don't know if it's vegan. I know it's vegetarian and you could probably make it vegan, but it's like, there's something you love that is that. So like, why can't you just apply that to a lot of different experiences with food? I
get it. The word vegan has very negative connotations, and I fully understand that. I remember the first year I went vegan, I was such an angry vegan because I was pissed. I was so angry at what I saw happening in our food systems, from the human rights standpoint to the animal abuse standpoint to, the soil degradation, and just really seeing that how our current food system was not sustainable from any real standpoint, and how all the human rights violations that, occur in it. And it just, it was devastating. And so I was a very angry vegan. Yeah. And I wanted to force people to open their eyes and to accept that this was happening and to make a change. Mm-hmm. But people don't listen to you when you're angry and you yell at them. Who would have thought, right? It gets them to shut down. And so after the first year, I thought, okay, this is not a sustainable way to have these conversations about, the climate and the land and these human rights violations. And so I took a different approach. And now the experience for myself is so different. Now I fully understand that with anything, not just food, but with anything, people won't change unless they want to change. Mm-hmm. And so there is no, your efforts will be very futile if you decide to really go after somebody and just kind of force them into creating changes that they never desired to begin with. And so my approach is very different these days. I simply wanted to offer food for people that are experiencing food insecurity, and they can take it or leave it. My hope is that we can do some education along the way to empower people to make better decisions for their health outcomes. Mm-hmm. But other than that, we don't, as an organization, and even as an individual, I don't tell people what not to eat or how much to eat or criticize any of their food choices, because there's so much that has to be considered when you're when you're talking to people about food. It's very personal, right? There are cultural aspects. There is sometimes trauma. There are health issues. There's a history, that you're not aware of. And ultimately I want to empower people with science-backed information to take this information and make better choices for those improved health outcomes, because we see what health looks like in America, mm-hmm. Based off of the standard American diet, and also with how, poor our healthcare system is. And being that most disease in the United States is preventable. And so, with heart disease being the number one killer, it's largely a preventable disease. And so it really comes down to the food choices we make and the food access that we have or don't have. And some of that is, the accountability, from the individual, but some of that is also accountability that needs to be had from our government and from the food companies who spend billions of dollars in research and development to make people addicted to food. Mm-hmm. And then we think we're making these choices ourselves when we're not.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I mean, there's so much to it. And I like what you said about we don't know anyone's situation because it's so easy to come into someone and be like, oh, well, you need to eat better. You need to do this. I can't remember what I termed it. I was thinking about it the other day of like, there's like this just phrase of like, if you could just, mm-hmm. When anybody brings out the just, it usually means they don't understand anything very well. Cause it's like, well, why don't you do what I'm doing after learning about this for the last 30 seconds? And I know this. Right. But it is something that's so important. And I mean, it is conversations that have come up really recently with, like Red 40 getting banned and RFK coming in and making hoping to make a lot of changes to food policy. Right. And because again, like so much of our healthcare system is so reactive, right? Mm-hmm. I have a heart disease. I go to the doctor, like, cool, you have heart disease. There's not much you can do. We'll put you on a statin, hopefully start exercising, hopefully start eating better. But this was to be solved 20 years ago. Right. And like with me, like I see like, in my life, I've seen people age and like I've seen people age well. I've seen people not age well. And I'm like, okay, the people that have aged well, it's eating healthy, taking care of yourself, staying mobile, stretching, exercising, especially weightlifting exercises so your bones stay dense. Mm-hmm. Mental health but there's so many things that I do to do that because I don't want to have those issues. Mm-hmm. But we don't have a system that rewards preventative decisions. It only rewards you if you just don't ever get sick.
Right. And even then, even if you don't get sick, you don't really get rewarded. We do have, we have a sick care system in America, not a healthcare system. Mm. And so the incentives for, healthcare companies, really do, the goal is to kind of keep people sick. And it sounds so kind of macabre, but what else is to be, concluded when you see the food landscape for what it is, and you see these food companies, for what they are. What else are you supposed to think other than, oh, I think maybe they're trying to keep me sick. Yeah. Why aren't we subsidizing vegetables and complex carbs and like healthy grains, right? Why do we subsidize, mostly meat and dairy, which have really high amounts of saturated fat? And that's the number one contributor to heart disease. And when you just look at the numbers, it's so devastating to see. I think the figures in 2023 from the CDC showed 690,000 individuals died as a cause of heart disease in 2023, and so it's incredible to see those numbers. 4 years prior to that, I believe the number was 650,000 heart disease cases. And so you see that and you compare it to where diabetes and cancer are, and they're eclipsed by heart disease. Yeah. And so it just makes you wonder, why is that the case? If this is largely a preventable disease, with simple things like diet and lifestyle, why are so many people suffering from this?
Yeah. And that's where you come in, is to help everybody, especially those that need it the most. But before we kind of jump into it a little bit more, I want to set the stage of how it came to be. So we talked about, born in Mexico, immigrated up here from with your family, but it sounds like food has always been an important part of your life, even before starting food justice. But set the stage a little bit of how all those played a contributing factor in getting it started.
Yes, I'll back up a little bit. So I was actually born in Los Angeles. Okay. But when I was a baby, my parents are from Mexico, and they came to the U.S. They had my brother, and they had me 3 years later, and then we went back to Mexico. And then when I was 5, they decided that, they wanted a better life, like so many immigrant families do, for their children. And so we came back to the U.S., but my life as I knew it was just Mexico. That's all I remember, from my childhood. And I have very vivid memories of, since the time I was 3 to 5. Weirdly, I remember those 2 years really well. My mom still is surprised every time we talk about it. She's just like, how in the world do you remember that? Like she just very specific things. I remember with great detail. And, so for me, growing up, I remember going to school. I remember my teacher, my kindergarten teacher. I remember there was these tiny little frogs that are native to Mexico, to the state of Jalisco, and they're teeny tiny like this. And when it would rain, which was often, they would come out in just like hundreds of them. And my brother and I would go out and we'd catch them. And I remember doing that still. I remember like how the rain felt and catching the frogs and like showing each other the frogs that we caught. And so for me, like my childhood is in Mexico. And then moving to the U.S. was very different. When we got here, I think my parents had like $500 in their pocket, and we didn't have anywhere to live. We didn't have a car. We had nothing. I think we had like two suitcases full of like clothes, and that was kind of it. And so we lived in this building, this like old empty building that we were not supposed to be living in, and it had. The floors were concrete. I remember they were really cold. And we had this one large blue sleeping bag that they opened up so that we could all fit on it, all 5 of us. And that's where we slept. And then we had a little like plug-in stove, the little camping stoves. Is that what they're called? Yeah. You're just like an electric griddle, I think like is what they're called. Yeah, a hot plate. I always forget the term. So that's what we cooked on. And we ate a lot of scrambled eggs until we couldn't afford that anymore. And then we just ate crackers, like, 3 times a day for many weeks. And I remember it so vividly, and it made me so angry when I got to Utah in 2020, and I started seeing a lot of unsheltered people as I was out, protesting with other people in the community. I was seeing all these unsheltered individuals who were asking for food and asking for water. And for some reason, I think it's because of like where I personally was at that time in my life. It made me so upset, just so angry. And I remember thinking back to, 25 years prior, being 5 years old and thinking, how is it that it's been 25 years and we live in the richest country in the world, the most powerful country in the world, and there are still so many people experiencing homelessness. And maybe because my daughter was so young at the time, she's 3 years old, and I saw a few moms on the street who were living on the street, and they had babies. And the experience of my daughter being a baby wasn't too long ago. And so I remember thinking it's so difficult to care for a baby with housing. I can't even imagine what that must be like, doing so, living on the street. And so, when Christmas time had rolled around, I decided to throw a Christmas dinner for people experiencing homelessness because I found myself alone in Utah. My daughter spends Christmas Day with her dad. We split custody, and so she's with him on Christmas Day. And so I was alone, and I thought, instead of feeling sorry for myself, let me be of service to other people and kind of distract myself while being in service to others. And so I had 2 days prior, I had put up a little poster that I made on Canva. I put it up on my Instagram and asked people to donate $400. And I thought maybe I'll get 200 if I'm lucky, and I'll figure out a way to make this work. But within like 48 hours, people from around the nation sent me $4,200. Wow. And it was more than enough. So I asked some people that I had met, just kind of protesting, asked them if they would be willing to help me put on this dinner. And we cooked a dinner for 200 people in my like 800 square foot apartment in Murray, and brought it over to Salt Lake City and set everything up outside. There was a camp called Camp Last Hope that was kind of like on these decommissioned railroad tracks. It was just like dirt and tracks, and it was under a viaduct. And it started snowing while we were setting up, but we set up everything up in chafing dishes, and I did a 5-course menu with dessert that was donated by Great Harvest in Taylorsville. I love those people. They're so kind. They donated all these dessert loaves, and Andrew from Mark of the Bistro, shout out to him. He's amazing. He lent me all these tables and chairs, and I said, I can pay you for them. Like I fundraised all this money, and he's like, no, like you just use them. And so he lent us tables and chairs. We wanted to provide this experience that was like really dignified. And so we got linens, and we got Christmas decorations and beautiful like plates and cutlery. And we set up dinner, and we served 200 people, a little over 200 people that night. Wow. Everybody got a Christmas stocking filled with like little goodies and a handwritten Christmas note. I just wanted people to feel seen and feel that they mattered, you know? And there was all this money left over. And so I kept using it to make food, and I gave the food away, and then I posted to Instagram, this is what I did with your donations. And people kept sending me money. So I just kept making more food and giving it away and posting the pictures, and people kept sending money. And so that went on for about a year. Wow. And
what was going through your head at this time? Are you just trying to keep up and just do good things with good resources? Or are you like, yeah, wait a minute, maybe there's something more I can do here?
There was no intention of starting a nonprofit ever. It was just, I know how to cook, and I know how to, I think I can do this kind of like at scale. And I'm going to try. And it worked really well. And people were, it was 2020. And so people were really motivated, you know. I think the public was really galvanized by everything that was happening locally and in the nation, to make a change, you know, and to be of service to each other, and to really practice, living in community, right? Yeah. Not just to go do community and then like, okay, we're done, let's go home, but to just simply dwell in the space of community. And so, there was so much support that we just kind of kept doing this thing over and over. And it was about a year later that a few different people told me I should start a nonprofit. And there was a little bit of money left. It wasn't anything significant. It was like, I don't know, maybe $4,000. I don't know who has ever started a nonprofit with like a few $1,000s. It was not smart. It really wasn't. You live and you learn. But I didn't even think how hard could it be. I just thought, why not? You know, I want to see like what this could become. And if we can use it to do X amount of good and then it turns to nothing, then we'll have done some good, and I'm happy with that. Yeah. As long as, one more person is better off, I'm happy with that. And so, what I thought would fail, and what, every statistic out there says is probably going to fail, we're going into year 5. Wow. And it's going really well. And so that's how it started. But yeah, I had just gotten to Utah in the month of March, and all that happened in December.
So what brought you here were you in California at the time when you moved here?
No, I was actually in Mexico. I had been staying in Mexico because I had lived in Nevada for like 10 years prior. And while we were living there, my daughter's dad and I, we just were really good friends, and we decided that, we wanted to travel the world to try to see if there was another country we could possibly live in. With me growing up in Mexico, and even when we moved back to California, I spent a lot of time in Mexico, in the state of Sinaloa, which is more central. Mm-hmm. And he had never left the country, and I was curious, and I said, let's go explore the world. And he had a lot of disposable income, and so he said, I think we should go do this now. And we tried to do it when we were still dating and we were younger, and it didn't work out. And then, of course, like now that we have a 2-year-old, yeah, this is a great timing. Let's go do this now. So we set off to do that, and we sold everything that we owned, like everything we owned. And we went to Mexico. We were living in Playa del Carmen at the time when the CDC announced this is officially a pandemic. And
of course, you finally time to go do the thing that you wanted to do. It's like, and pause.
And we had booked an apartment in Paris. We were going to stay there for 3 months, and then we were supposed to go to like Greece or Thailand. We were trying to decide, and everything was booked. The apartment, the plane tickets, everything was done. And I said, I think we have to go home, because my friends in Paris at the time were saying, it's really bad. Like, don't come here. they were being ravaged by COVID at the time. And my daughter's dad doesn't speak any other languages other than, well, he knows sign language. It's his first language, but just English. But in France, it's Spanish, English, and French, obviously. And so I thought, and English isn't used too much. And if you speak English, they don't like you very much. So the time that I was there, I used French and Spanish. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to be solely responsible for the three of us in this country that he's never been in. And, our daughter's barely turned 3 years old and dealing with a pandemic as well. I thought, this is a really bad idea. I think we should go home.
Yeah.
So we came home, but we had nowhere to go because we sold everything we owned just months prior. And so his parents live in Utah, and they had like a whole, finished, not a basement, but it's like a second floor that had 2 bedrooms and a living room and just like this whole setup where we could, stay for a while. And they said, why don't you come here until you figure out your next steps? So we did that. And then it just kind of never left. Started a nonprofit by accident. And
sometimes the paths just open up for you if you just keep doing the right things and pay attention to the right things going around you.
Yeah. I did not intend on staying in Utah for very long. I had visited Utah before. I did not find it, personally, I did not find it friendly. It wasn't a very nice experience for me. And I obviously, I love, the geography. It's beautiful here. There's a lot of very positive things about Utah. But luckily when we came back in 2020, I found a lot of really like wonderful people, and, with time, even more wonderful people. Yeah. And now that I've been here, this is year 5, some of the best people I've ever met, I found them here. And so I'm really grateful for the experience, and Utah has definitely grown on me. It's very different from Mexico and from California. But yeah, I'm happy with the experience. It's taught me a lot. I've learned a lot about myself here in Utah.
And it's such a fun way to get to know it because, if you are doing average things, average job, average whatever, you're going to get exposed to average people, grab bag, good, bad, whatever. But when you put out this energy of, hey, people need my help, I have the resources to do it, people are supporting me, I'm going to. And it's the example of, Great Harvest guy being like, hey, like I can, or and food, tables and chairs, like you're like, I can pay for this. It's not, but like to see people in such an authentically charitable way to be like, hey, I can't do what you're doing. I have other things I have to do. I wish I could do this more. So this is how I can help you. Right. And so I can't imagine a better way to like be in a semi-new place. You've had your feet under you before it started, but at the same time being like, oh, I get like my introduction to this is to be interacting with the people who want to help people the most. So it's, and obviously we've talked about a couple of them, like, Barry Mendenhall and like all of these other people who play a big part in this to have that slowly become the people that you interact with, work with, and be able to make such a big impact on so many people. Like what a great way to build a circle. Yeah, truly. It was, I feel like it all happened very, very quickly. And it's so funny. In the very beginning, while, I was in the streets protesting with hundreds of other people, I was using my own savings to pay for water bottles. And then I bought these coolers and I filled them with ice and I chilled the water because it was summertime. It was like 105 degrees. And I just started distributing water bottles with the help of some other people, and just hundreds of water bottles. In one day, sometimes we would do like 600 water bottles. And then people kept asking for food. And so we were kind of distributing, like I would make burritos and sandwiches in the very beginning. And I remember thinking so much had changed because I went from, having this partner who had all this disposable income, and like we were really comfortable. And then we weren't a couple anymore, but we were still in friendship with each other, co-parenting. And then when the pandemic happened, everything changed. I had no income. He lost a significant portion of his income. And it reminded me of growing up and just like growing up in poverty, right? And my parents come from even deeper poverty, my dad especially. And I remember thinking during 2020 how much things had changed. And still I felt grateful to have
my health, and that my daughter had her health, and that her dad had his health, and that we could be, together, and that we weren't in worse circumstances. I was just trying to focus on the good, and remembering, what pieces of my childhood looked like, and then just really curious about what homelessness in Utah looked like and what other people must be going through with, this pandemic. And so much had changed that it really put me back into the space of remembering my roots and remembering all the lessons that I grew up with in my Mexican culture. And part of that is existing in reciprocity. And so that is, I remember very viscerally kind of bringing all of that to the forefront and kind of operating from that space. And it felt like a even more authentic version of me. And I thought, if I could do this always, like, that's the goal. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I committed myself to doing, was to existing in that space forever, in perpetuity. And so that's why, even though it's been such a struggle to start this organization and to keep it going, oftentimes like self-funding it. And for the majority of the lifespan of the organization, I've had a full-time job. So this is something that I've managed to keep afloat in my spare time on nights and weekends. And, but I'm so like grateful for the experience. And, there's been a lot of times where I've had very, very, strong frustrations with it. But, honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. It's been such a learning experience, and it's connected me to all these wonderful people. Yeah. And so, yeah, I'm just excited for all the different things that it's brought me, including here today.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. No, thank you for all that you are doing. And it's interesting when, two things. One is when you do something without, like, so many people I talk to, not many of them have been on the podcast, but just like other people I've run into, it's like they start this business, they start this thing being like, all right, I'm going to make money off of this, mm-hmm. which is fine. Like, I'll never fault anybody for it. It's how we survive. But at the same time, to try to financially engineer something to do just for a financial outcome usually means the journey isn't going to be, it's not going to be yours because it's not personal. It's not it's just money. Mm-hmm. But then also it isn't aligned with who you are and who you need to be. And so it's interesting with you saying like, hey, like, I want to be myself. I want to be my authentic self. I want to help people, not being like, well, if I can have this nonprofit and then this can come in here and get my executive director role and blah, 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 blah. Like, that would just be like so silly.
Right.
And it's so nice. I mean, even like you alluded to earlier about saying like, if I can help one person, it was all worth it. And I remember when I started the podcast, a lot of people like right off the bat, friends are like, so what's the goal? What are you trying to, what's the angle here? And I'm like, I don't know yet. Like, I just want to sit, I want to have conversations with people. I know that this is part of a journey I need to be on. I don't know if it's the end, but I need to fill it out. Mm. And like, thankfully it's gotten to a point where, it takes care of itself, but at the same time, like, it's helped me be so much more of my authentic self because I've talked about it before, but like, there's this interesting moment in people's lives that I've experienced where, because in the world today, we're so rewarded to not be ourselves and just to fake whatever we need to be to get to where we need to go. It happens in professional life. You show up to an interview. What do you want me to say? What do I need to do? What do I need to bend over backwards to get this job? Only to find out it gets the job and it's nothing you like because you just lied about who you are to get there. So there's a mismatch. Similar with dating. If I just want, there's this really hot girl and I just want her to be mine. I'll do whatever, say whatever I want to. I'm going to be codependent. And it's going to be toxic. It's going to be all these things, but at least we're together. And, but when you can take a step back, like, hey, actually, you know what? I'm just going to be me. I'm going to be my authentic self. Mm-hmm. I am going to realize that some people are going to go, some people are going to stay, and just be fluid about it. But then this flywheel starts to happen of like, when you start to be your authentic self, you put out your authentic energy. And because the thing that all of us are best at is being ourselves, you start to see yourself like do things better than you ever had. Mm-hmm. And when you start to do those get better. And then as you put out that energy, people see it and respond to it and then find you. And the next thing you know, you're doing the things you've always supposed to be doing. You're surrounded by the people you've always have, who should have been there from the beginning. And then everybody who wasn't aligned with who you actually are slowly start to filter out. It's not like you have to be like, oh, like you're out of here. Like you're not perfectly aligned with me, but like there's people in my life. I'm like, ooh, I can't be an inner circle person anymore. You're like an arm's distance or like a golf once a year or all these other relationships. Mm-hmm. And it's been so fun to see that in my own life and have people also like see that in me being like, what changed? I'm like, I don't know. Like, it's just like,
I did.
it's just me. Like, I'm
Right.
sorry.
Right.
But it's hard too. Cause like I try to help people. I mean, like a lot of people reach out to me for advice and I'm always down to talk. But it's fun to see how much of it can start with that of just being present, being who you are, and just kind of learn to let people be who they need to be, and you be who you need to be, and you don't need their validation to keep going. But
yeah, I think I love that the conversation has taken us to this topic. It's one of my favorite things to ruminate on and to discuss. I think one of the most powerful things people can do is really get to know themselves, truly, authentically, thoroughly, and consistently. There's something just so powerful and profound about being so rooted in yourself that no external force, no external individual can uproot you from that, right? And then you become kind of like untouchable and unstoppable in the best way, not in an egotistical kind of, pompous way, but in a truly grounded and centered and elevated manner, right? And that's very dangerous to the problematic systems that currently exist, right? Whether you're talking about academic systems or government entities or religious entities, whatever.
the patriarchy.
Yes. It's very dangerous, because what happens when you connect with yourself is that you realize how simple we really are as humans, but also how extraordinary we are, right? And how when you start recognizing all these things in yourself, you recognize them in others, and then this magical thing happens when you connect with other people, whether it be in friendship or with family members or with in romantic partnerships. This it's an incredible kind of like force. It's so hard to describe, but when you have it, you have it, and it's just it's like magic. And there's that's something that I think something I've tried to be really cognizant of, especially the last few years, these last 5 years since coming to Utah, kind of because I was forced to reckon with that, and also because it's just something I've always been very curious about. I've always spent a lot of time kind of just thinking, like a lot of time alone. And I love people. I desperately love people, but I also love spending time alone. And one of my favorite things to do is just to think about why people do the things they do, and why the world is the way it is, and how do we build better outcomes in every facet of the term, and how do we do it together? How do we do it sustainably? And in order to reach anything sustainably, it has to be authentic, and it has to be in collaboration with each other and with the earth. And that's really like my goal for till the end of time, is to be rooted in myself, and to hopefully be a mirror, and to see other people's experiences, and use that as a mirror for myself to continue in that growth. And I think that has bled through the organization as well. And I think that's why I've been able to connect with the people that I have just been absolutely just wonderful and so giving and so authentic. And not to say that it's like peachy and roses 100% of the time. It's not. But it's really just the most wonderful thing when you can be in healthy relationship with other people, whether it's friendship or work, and to have conflict and be able to come together and say, hey, like, this is what happened, and I'm not happy with this. I'm not comfortable with this. Can we talk about it? And can we resolve it? And you see the real intention from the other individual, right? Who wants to do real repair work, so that we can both have good outcomes, and so that everyone around us can have good outcomes. It's so, again, I don't know what else to describe it as other than as magic. It's such a pure form of love to come together and to like rectify an issue, and to say, I feel safe discussing this with you, even though it's so uncomfortable. We're going to be in this discomfort together and learn from each other, so that we can continue on our individual and collective goals for the betterment of all, right? And so, that's I feel like that's what I've been able to do a lot more of these recent years. And funny enough, the organization has helped me do that because we have really difficult conversations at FJC. You know, we're doing these very radical things, trying to feed people. And
how dare you?
How dare we? How dare we want everyone to be fed with good food? And it hasn't always, it hasn't been received well. We've gotten a lot of criticism for it. And, much to my shock. And so we often have very uncomfortable conversations about the topic and about specifically the justice part of food justice. But that's okay, because that's what we're supposed to be doing, is having difficult conversations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's when you have those conversations where it's not rooted in power or dominance. It's like, hey, I just want a better outcome. And you're involved in the better outcome. We can all be better people. And even going to, the topic you started with of like the topic of change. And so many people don't change until the pain is so bad that the only way to get rid of it is to change, or in order to reach a certain goal, life, whatever, that the motivation to get that done outweighs the change, then you will do it. But most people don't. Like most people will not change.
Right.
Like that is my fundamental belief in my life at this point, is I will never expect a single person to change. I will take you as you are right now. You can tell me all the things that you hope and plan and wish to do, but I'm gonna assume we're gonna stay the same. And if you do better, like keep crushing it. Like I'll be your cheerleader, but at the same time, like I'll never expect someone else to be something. But when you can see people do those changes, with you moving here and being like, oh shit, like life's getting real. I'm here for me. I have my daughter I need to take care of. Like I need to show up for myself. It's interesting because like I said, like a lot of people don't want to change. And even when you, in a similar way that you talked about, being an angry vegan and just wanting to shake people, be like, just change, like look at the world that it could be if you could just do this. And I'm like, well, have you ever had a chicken nugget? It's pretty fire. But at the same time, like those same conversations with people, it's like, if you could just break out of this habit of your life and like, well, everything would be so much better. But like, I don't even know what I don't even know to know.
Right.
So it's hard. And like, there's a book I've been reading where it talks about how all of the evolution that we've had up until this point has all been physical. We've, evolved these bodies from Neanderthals and, all the way from little toads that crawled out of the ocean. But he talks about how the next wave of evolution is all going to be mental and emotional. Because like, again, like our bodies, like we don't really, there's no like physical force in the world that's like, oh no, we have to like survive the saber-toothed tiger or the ice is coming. We have to stay warm. It's about, and it alludes to a lot of the things that you're working on, is like this empathy towards other people, understand we're part of a bigger system and it can't be me, it has to be us. And so it's, even in today's landscape, we find a lot of that, of like kind of these clashing values of like, let's take a step back. There's principles and there's outcomes. And oftentimes you can't have both. So you can say, I don't believe in sugar. I'm not going to eat any sugar. But then realize like, oh, shoot, my mom loves baking baked goods and sweets. And the only thing to like get together with her is to go have desserts or enjoy them together. Like, what am I going to do? I either hold on to this principle that sugar's terrible, or I say, you know what? This outcome is more important than this principle. I'm going to do this. And so many people have these principles that they're holding on to, but at the same time, it keeps them from this outcome that they want to have, instead of being like, oh, if I can just like let go of this a little, you don't have to get rid of all of your principles, but to say, maybe I need to redefine the way I think about this so I can have that. And also maybe there's times you're like, oh, I don't want that outcome. Actually, this principle is more important to me. And so it's kind of like the same theory of like, an educational or like even like scientific research perspective. Like it's easy to look at anything in a vacuum, but when it comes into practice and actually rolling things out, very different. And I'm sure that you've experienced so much in the Food Justice Coalition. You're like, in theory, everybody should have good food, quality food, but in the real world, this is a lot more dynamic of an issue of getting things together, coordinating, executing, it's so much more than that.
Absolutely. And that goes back to the notion, that, or the very real experience for so many that, people don't like the word vegan because vegans are often really mean and they're really often, not intersectional. And in order to have any sort of sustainable, empathetic, system, and we have to take into consideration the many facets that we exist in, right? And so, me personally, being vegan for 8 years and raising my daughter vegan since birth, it just like that. I know that is my choice and my experience, and that I've been able to afford this experience for myself But I can't ever demand that of anybody else because I don't know what their principles are. I don't know what their life looks like. And in the abstract, yes, and everybody could just eat vegan very affordably and very, with accessible ingredients. However, there are so many other things that come into play that even if you have the access to low cost food, there are things that are very difficult to change in people's lives, such as like their routine, their time available. Do they have an hour to cook a healthy meal for them and their family every day? A lot of people don't, especially those that are experiencing severe food insecurity. And then there's, like cultural components. There's so many things that even if you have, say 2 of the 7 factors, it's difficult. And so all we can do is, as you said, is keep in mind, the principle and the outcome. And I think it's about learning with each other and being able to have real conversations with each other and existing in difficult spaces with each other and moving the needle towards something that is more empathetic and more sustainable and more and healthier for everyone involved, right? So that's what we hope will happen with the work that we're doing. And for me personally, all the work that I'm doing, I've worked in so many different spaces. I've worked in political spaces. I've worked in, the private sector, now in NGOs. And it's just in everything that I do, my ultimate goal is to get people to see how similar we are and how you will benefit so much from existing in the discomfort and from really sitting with yourself and getting to know yourself and being really honest with yourself about why you do the things you do and why you say the things you say and why you believe these things and where do these come from? And is that really the life you want to be living? Because what I've seen for as long as I can remember, and even more now as an adult, is there are so many people living in cognitive dissonance, so many. And it just sets them in this path of destruction and this path of isolation. And because, we have to connect with each other at work and we have to be collaborative, a lot of people have a really hard time in a work setting or in school settings, right? In any setting where you have to be with other people for any prolonged period of time, because you're often putting on a version of yourself that is not you, and you don't know how to exist as the same person as who you really are at work and at home and in your relationships, right? And you live with this ease when you just really know who you are and you're connected to yourself and well-rooted in yourself. There's just this ease that you're able to live with all the time. And I feel like there's such a lack of that in so many people. Like they're just putting on this, this facade, right? Mm-hmm. And it changes from every space that they exist in. And that's got to be so heavy and so tiring. And just watching it, oftentimes, because that's a space that I used to exist in as well.
We've all been there.
Oh, absolutely. And it just, I think the more you come away from that space, the easier it is to see it, to recognize it. And it feels exhausting in a different way because you see, those close to you living in that space and you just want to shake them and say, it doesn't have to be like this, right? Like, I want you to be happy. Like, let's figure out why we're doing these things and how do we make these healthier shifts. And it can lead to so much conflict. I've had so much conflict, and I've been fortunate to learn a lot of lessons from the conflict in my life. This last year, I had one of the biggest conflicts I've ever had in my life, and something that I didn't think would happen, and then it did, and it was so jarring. And the experience continues to evolve, but it taught me so much about myself. I'm so grateful for it, but at the same time, it was really difficult, and I'm still processing it, and I won't be done processing it for some time. But luckily, I can exist in the same room with this other individual despite them doing what they did. And we have to see each other, in work functions. And at the end of the day, I'm of the belief that I wish, the people that have wronged me, I wish them the best, just far away from me. Yeah. But I do truly wish them the best. I feel like a lot of people operate from pain and from anger and from being disconnected with themselves. And oftentimes there's nothing they can really do about it because they've not been given those tools. So I try to remember that saying, I can only meet you as deeply as you've met yourself, and remembering that, right? And not, kind of shifting all blame away from them and saying, oh, they didn't know any better, it's not their fault. No, there has to be self-accountability, but also being able to give people enough grace to understand that maybe they didn't have the same lessons that you did in life, and that's okay. Yeah.
And it's such an amazing experience when you meet the people that have, when they're like, oh yeah, it's so fun to meet people like, yeah, I'm comfortable being like by myself and being in my thoughts. Like I was down in southern Utah a couple of weeks ago, and so one of my friends has some Airbnb property down there. Asked me if he had the weekday times because I was starting a new job. I was like, I need to go disconnect and just be by myself and just mentally refocus. And so I was down there for like 3.5 days by myself. And there was a time I was on a hike and I just kind of I found myself laughing to myself. And I was like, I have a good time when I'm like, it's just me. But then I talked to other friends like, oh, you were by yourself for like more than 5 minutes. Like I could never do that. I'm like, hope you can one day, but not today. Cause but then you meet those people that can, you're like, oh, this is special, because if you know yourself as well as you can, and they know themselves, and all of a sudden this shallow relationship turns into such a profound relationship, and of like aligning on all of those deep levels. And so it's been fun to see some of those, friendships and other relationships start to bloom. And you're like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. Yeah.
You reminded me of a conversation I had with this woman in her 60s who had just retired. When I was having this conversation with her, and she raised, her kids, and they were successful, and she did really well for herself. She worked in real estate, and she was telling me I asked her, well, what are you doing with all your free time now? And she had just retired like the week prior, like brand new to retirement. And she said, well, the first day I woke up and I didn't know what to do with myself. And so I just sat there and I thought about, what am I going to do with my day today? Well, I don't have to do anything, but, I should probably clean the house. And then, starting with like these small things around you. And then once the house is clean, then what? Oh, I should probably go get groceries. Okay, then groceries, then what? And then so I kept asking her, well, what do you want to do? Like, what makes you happy? Like, how do you want to exist? Right. And she was saying she had never really thought about it before, because she was just in this space of like raising the kids and doing the job and being the wife and, being the sister and the friend and all. And so I asked her, have you ever thought about like who you are when all your identities kind of like wash away? Like, who are you? Not mom, not sister, not friend, like who are just you, right? And she said, I haven't really thought about it before. And I talked about how, I take myself to the movies all the time. I take myself to dinner all the time. Like, I love spending time with myself, and I crack myself up too. I very much connect with that. I just have conversations with myself. I think a lot of it is like the ADHD. And she was saying how she was looking forward to taking herself to a movie, and how she hadn't considered that before. And I'm like, yeah, you can just literally do whatever you want.
It's crazy.
It's amazing. I love it. So I love spending time with my friends, but it's a different type of outlet when you get to spend time with yourself and really like experience yourself, right? As you, and especially since having my daughter for a number of years, I was mostly mom. Like, that was the predominant facet of my being, right? And part of that was like me trying to figure out like, well, who am I now that I'm a parent, right? Like, what does this mean? And there was some kind of like heavy times. And now the balance is trying to be mom and trying to be, CEO, and trying to be friend and trying to be an employee and trying to be myself still. And I really think we need to also give a healthy amount of prioritization to who we are without all these other identities. I don't think it's healthy when we don't give that enough prioritization, because then you don't have sustainability, because you're just functioning as this person that the outside world thinks that you're supposed to be, right? And that doesn't...
And this internal person is screaming.
Yeah. Yeah, because that internal person like also is alive and there and, wants to live life. And so you have to give that facet of you time to breathe and to speak and to exist and to just to be. And so this is a conversation I have often with so many close friends. And like I said, I could talk for hours and hours about this, but we can move to other topics.
It's a topic I love too. And it's a fun one to join with people who do understand it. Because it's hard when it like falls on like
deaf ears.
Like deaf ears. Just like, cool, never mind. I'll go fuck myself over here.
They just look at you like, "Are you okay?
Like,
that's really weird.
Are you broken?"
Exactly.
And you're like, "Au contraire."
Exactly.
But I want to give credit to some of the people who have supported you. But I mean, like, who are some of the people that deserve a shout out for how much they do for Food Justice Coalition?
The list is long. I'm so fortunate. The list is very long. Missy Grace, who you recently also had on from Public Coffee. She's just such a community champion. She's helped so many people.
She's like honestly one of the best people.
Like
we still email, like she'll in the last week I've gotten a text from her, an email from her, an Instagram DM, and it's just like nice. Like, Missy, you're so she's such a good human. Anyway, I could talk about Missy all day.
She's like she's brilliant and she's so cool and she's just one of the nicest people authentically and just such a connector and so just a force. So Missy, of course, our friends we just saw yesterday at the Black Physicians of Utah. They're just wonderful collaborators. We love working with them. Outside of that, Bug Farms was really supportive of us for a number of years, and Green Urban Lunchbox as well. We love Green Urban Lunchbox. Specific shout out to farmers Sunny and Jess because they do a phenomenal job with that farm and donate product to us so that we can include some local organic ingredients into our food. Our friends at the Salt Lake Buddhist Temple who have been subsidizing our space for the last year so that it's completely free and we can keep our overhead low. The entire board, they're phenomenal. Like they don't have to do any of this, but they do because they're good people and they care and they know what it's like to be a marginalized entity. With the Buddhist temple, the Salt Lake Buddhist Temple is in Japantown, and Japantown has just been forced to shrink. It's been shrunken to this tiny little space, and so we need to give more support to Japantown and to other communities that are experiencing severe marginalization. And so yeah, we love the board. Our programs coordinator Kenzie, who is part of our team, but also deserves a shout out because she's incredible. She just coordinates all the programs and is such a fantastic community advocate. She does a lot of work for Japanese Americans as well as for different entity groups, and she's also part of the Salt Lake Buddhist Temple and the Ogden Temple. They're, oh my goodness, our friends at Give Group. Those are our some of our more recent friends. We met them last year and they've been incredible. Specifically, want to shout out Chris Parker, who's the founder. He's just been so generous. They subsidize our office space currently, and so we get to have this beautiful space in one of their buildings that is it was office space, and it's being turned into affordable housing. So it's an adaptive reuse project.
For South?
515 East, 100 South. That's where our office is now. It's the building. Their generosity has just been incredible. And so we're working with them on a really cool kind of massive project, which I can talk about in a little bit. But we adore them and their whole team. We get to share office space with them. They're so kind. They're so chill and so professional and so kind. And I'm so appreciative of that because I've had the opposite of that for many years in my life, and a little scarred from having those experiences. And so it's really it's so good for my nervous system to be in this building and to just be around professional people that are just really kind, and just very helpful. There's so many small business owner. Our friends Candy and Byron from Eats Bakery have been very supportive. Our friend Helen from The Stockist donates to our auctions, and different product when we were doing, we do regular clothing outreach. And when we needed hand sanitizer in 2020, she gave us a bunch of really nice hand sanitizer and shoes and clothing and all these things that we could give to people that were experiencing, housing insecurity. Oh my goodness. I could go on and on. And then of course, our friend, Ava Lopez Chavez, who you also had on. Everyone on the council, particularly Ava, she's just been so incredibly helpful. And I'm very fortunate to call her, a trusted friend. She's one of my closest friends and is just, I feel really grateful that to have her as a friend and as an advisor. She gives really good advice, and she's so fun. She's just brilliant and fun.
Oh yeah, I mean she's great. Like it's fun, even whether we're at a dinner or we're hanging out here at Edison House or just like riffing about something. She has a very authentic energy and cares so much about people.
She does, yeah. And I love that we share our culture. She's also Mexican, so we get to speak Spanish to each other all the time, which is really nice because I hardly get to speak Spanish these days unless I'm on the phone with my mom. But as someone, as a person of color in Utah, I don't get to use this muscle enough, and it terrifies me that one day I'll wake up and I won't know how to speak Spanish. And so I get to practice with her. Our board members too we have fantastic board members. And I know that like they're supposed to be, serving our mission with us, but I feel so incredibly lucky that we have who we have on the board. Particularly, I want to shout out Ashley Patterson because she has this wealth of knowledge that we get to tap into. She's the former executive director of Wasatch Community Gardens. She's responsible for, driving this capital campaign and getting them a headquarters, and she's just brilliant. And so she sits on our board, and we're just so fortunate to have her. And then we have some awesome legislators. Grant Miller, one of the newest legislators who carried our appropriations requests, which we were very fortunate to get this year. We got our full request, which was wild. We really didn't think it would happen. And, Senator Plum, Gente Lee Provost, incredible human being as well. We gave us some good input. And so, man, I'm honestly, there's 45 different people I could name. So
millions of people. Well, yeah. A lot of people who want to help make it better and support you.
Oh, and then our volunteers, we have the best. I'm sorry. I say this and I sound like a broken record. We have the best volunteers, truly heart of gold people that show up for all the right reasons. And they help in the way that we need them to help. Not just the way that they want to help, which is so beneficial for us when we say this is how you can best support us, and then they do it in the way that we ask them to, and they trust our expertise. Yep. There's nothing worse than having a volunteer who wants to come in, to help, but kind of for selfish reasons, and they just do what they want. And then you're like, ooh, why did you do that? That's actually not helpful. Yeah. Exactly. And luckily we have almost none of those. I think we had one and he kind of exited. He kind of made his way out, which was fortunate for us. We're like, okay, thank goodness. He wasn't very nice to some of the women with the female volunteers. So he left and that was good. But other than that, no, all our volunteers, spectacular, just wonderful human beings.
Just gathering all the best people.
Truly, they're this is what I feel so incredibly proud of, is that I feel like this is what we attract because this is what we're putting out. And so it kind of is the signal to us, right, that we're doing a good job is because we keep attracting all these incredible people who have these just wonderful values and who are just very solid people and smart people and just so kind. We keep getting more of those. And then those that have been with us since day one keep showing up every day, day after day, week after week. And I'm like, you would think we're paying them to show up as often as they do, but they just show up because they care and they want to help. They want to build a better future for everyone. And they're here with us and we couldn't be more grateful.
Right. Thanks for building a place that attracts those people to do good and even better things together.
Oh yeah. It's a partnership, we couldn't do it without them and there'd be nothing for them to do if we didn't do it. So it's kind of it's this mutually beneficial thing where everybody wins and we're super proud of that. Well, we're building a cafe and that's really cool.
Let's talk about that. Yeah. So let's hear about the cafe that you're working on.
Yeah. So I'll share a little bit because we can't share too much right now, but with our friends at Give Group, they do really cool stuff. They build affordable housing and they are just so supportive to so many nonprofits. And so one of the things that they're wanting to install in this building at 515 is a robust food resource. And so Food Justice Coalition will be operating a cafe space where we will be serving not only our clients, but also the general public. So you'll be able to come into the space and get a meal for $3 to $4. So that's really cool because, very few places offer healthy food that's actually affordable. And so
like 4 or 5 times that.
Exactly. And so that's we're super excited.
No, I'm excited about it too. I mean, that whole building is such a, like, I actually used to work in that building when I first came home from my mission. I was in a call center there. And then when I had Ashley Atkinson on the podcast, I was like, it's turning into that. That's a lot better use of that.
Oh, yeah. I know. Speaking of brilliant individuals, and I don't know her too well, but what little I do know, I'm like, oh, she's so cool. I'm telling you, the whole team is just good, brilliant people.
Oh, yeah. Great people. Well, Jeanette, I want to end with the 2 questions I always ask everybody at the end of each episode. One, if you could have someone on the podcast and hear about their story and what they're up to, who would you want to hear from?
Oh, man. There's so many good choices. The first one that comes to mind, Rachel Garrett from Common Thread.
Okay.
Yeah, she's a psychologist, and she also is a mom and a nonprofit founder. And she works with kids in the foster system and is one of the best people I've ever met. And just also a powerhouse. She would be fantastic.
Sounds like a great person.
Yeah.
And then if people want to find out more about the Food Justice Coalition, if people want to donate, get involved, what's the best place to find more information?
Yes, a best place would be our social media, which is at Food Justice Coalition, period. And then our website is foodjusticecoalition.org. On the website, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a place to enter your email address so you can get on our newsletter. That's probably one of the very best ways, because then you get to know things before the general public does. And then we're very active on our social media, particularly on Instagram and Facebook. So those are the best spots.
Make sure to follow. I'll put the link to the website where to donate, get involved in the show notes. So make sure to go check that out. But Jeanette, thank you so much. This has been great. Every conversation, I always end up being like, I can have an expectation, but it always exceeds expectation. And it's been fun to hear more about you, everything that you're up to, and excited where it goes from here, because we're grateful to have you keep bringing all these great people together, and excited for what's to come.
This has been fantastic. So much fun. Always great speaking with you.
Thank you. Ugh. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Salt Lake City Podcast. Don't forget to like, follow, review, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends. And we'll catch you next week. We'll see you there.